Hello guys, support Sanders the Great by subscribing and getting us to 1,000 subscribers. We truly appreciate the support. They threw loaded questions like hidden landmines, desperate to watch Deshaun Sanders' son blow up his own locker room live on national television. But while the media vultures circled with blood in the water, Shedeur didn't just dodge the traps, he systematically disarmed them with cold, terrifying perfection. Every calculated deflection left hungry journalists starving for drama, while NFL insiders watched in awe as a young quarterback executed masterclass psychological warfare. They came hunting for a primetime scandal, but what they discovered was a cold-blooded general who refuses to bleed under pressure. And if you think his poise in front of a live microphone is impressive, wait until you see what this mental ice means for every defense coming for his head this season. Training camp opened in Berea under a stifling cloud of media speculation, where every single press conference felt less like an athletic update and more like an interrogation under harsh courtroom lights. Day after day, a dense wall of national correspondents and local beat reporters crowded around the podium, their camera lenses flashing like strobe lights, all seeking one specific outcome: a crack in the armor of primetime's youngest son. The media circus was operating at full throttle, and the narrative had already been predetermined long before Shedeur Sanders stepped foot onto the practice field for his second professional season. Sports media outlets across the country were utterly ravenous for friction, constantly probing for imaginary fractures between Shedeur head coach Todd Monken and veteran teammate Deshaun Watson. Every single repetition in 11-on-11 drills was dissected like critical evidence in a trial. If Watson took the first team snaps on a hot August morning, sensationalized headlines immediately declared that Sanders was being systematically demoted down the depth chart. If Sanders took the majority of first-team reps the following afternoon, hot-take analysts frantically claimed the franchise was actively attempting to alienate Watson and force him out the door. The modern sports news machine did not care about mechanics, red zone progression reads, or protection calls. They cared exclusively about explosive controversy and volatile ego clashes that could fuel 24-hour outrage cycles. Every microphone thrust toward Shedeur came equipped with a dangerous agenda: bait the young quarterback into complaining about rep distribution, push him to criticize his offensive coordinator's rotation, or coax him into firing a shot at his senior colleague. Local beat writers published endless daily reports, attempting to spin standard practice rotations into evidence of internal chaos. They weaponized speculative commentary, scrutinizing his body language after last-minute schedule changes sent him to work with the second unit. They analyzed every sigh, every step, and every subtle facial expression, desperately constructing a narrative of an entitled, celebrity-born passer growing frustrated with the organization. National commentators publicly debated whether a player raised under the bright spotlights of Deshaun Sanders' household could ever tolerate the unglamorous reality of an NFL position battle without sparking a total public relations disaster. Journalists weren't merely asking questions, they were strategically planting emotional landmines, waiting eagerly for a single slipped word or a moment of visible annoyance that could be trimmed into a viral clip. They pushed aggressively into sensitive topics, questioning whether Shedeur believed he had earned the undisputed starting mantle following his Pro Bowl rookie campaign. They pressed him on Monken's complex offensive system, trying to force him to admit that the scheme favored Watson's skill set over his own. Yet, while the press room grew increasingly hostile and the narrative machine spun out of control, Shedeur remained completely unaffected at the absolute center of the storm. To reveal the mechanics behind this press conference siege, one must step back from the sensory overload of flashing cameras and carefully dissect the exact geometry of the traps laid out before Shedeur Sanders. Journalists do not throw raw punches in high-stakes media scrums. Instead, they construct elaborate narrative labyrinths where every available exit path is rigged to collapse into a fresh scandal. A microscopic examination of 3 specific press conference moments from training camp exposes the clinical malice embedded within the daily questioning. The first classic snare occurred midway through the opening week, following an afternoon practice session where Deshaun Watson took every single snap with the first team unit. A veteran beat reporter stepped up, adjusted his voice to sound sympathetic, and delivered a seemingly innocent probe regarding rep distribution. The reporter asked if Shedeur felt it was unfair to his personal progression as an NFL starter that his first-team repetitions were suddenly cut in half, subtly hinting that coach Todd Monken might be artificially tilting the scales toward the high-priced veteran. The narrative trap here was mathematically pristine. If Shedeur agreed and voiced even a hint of personal frustration, the national media would immediately print headlines declaring that the young quarterback was publicly whining about unfair coaching decisions and creating locker room division. Conversely, if he gave a standard passive answer like no comment, media pundits would claim his silence was a clear sign of brooding resentment towards the coaching staff. The second major ambush came 2 days later, targeting the dynamic between Shedeur and offensive coordinator Todd Monken's updated scheme. A national analyst seized the microphone and posed a highly technical, loaded question about the team's shift toward heavy pass protection schemes. He noted that the new design appeared tailored specifically to mitigate Watson's recent pocket mobility issues, then flatly asked Shedeur if he felt constrained or compromised by running a playbook that seemed built around someone else's physical limitations. This was a classic poison choice trap. If Shedeur admitted the scheme didn't maximize his unique skill set, he would be instantly accused of undermining his offensive coordinator and questioning the coaching staff's vision. If he claimed he loved every single aspect of the playbook without nuance, critics would call him dishonest, arrogant, or oblivious to tactical reality. The third and most dangerous explosive device was detonated toward the end of camp, centered entirely around Deshaun Watson's ongoing recovery and physical health. Following a practice where Watson struggled with throwing velocity, a reporter asked Shedeur point-blank if he personally felt ready to take over as the permanent, unquestioned leader of the team if Watson's body failed him again early in the season. The bait was pure, concentrated ego poison. A traditional young quarterback eager to showcase confidence would naturally seize that moment to declare his unwavering readiness to lead the franchise. But doing so in this exact context would mean publicly stepping over an injured, struggling veteran teammate. It would allow the press to frame Shedeur as a cold, predatory backstabber waiting for his teammate to fall. The journalists had engineered a situation where standard athletic confidence could be weaponized as toxic disloyalty, proving that every sentence directed toward the podium was explicitly designed to generate an outrage headline at any cost. When those carefully engineered traps were sprung before the microphone, Shedeur Sanders did not flinch, hesitate, or offer the raw emotional reaction the media corps so desperately craved. Instead, he executed a clinical masterclass in media deflection, dissecting each loaded query with surgical precision and leaving the press room completely empty-handed. When asked about his reduction in first-team repetitions compared to Deshaun Watson, Shedeur did not complain about coaching decisions or brood over depth chart politics. Instead, he seamlessly executed a classic pivot toward personal accountability and relentless self-improvement. He calmly explained that whether he received 2 reps or 20 in a given practice, his objective remained entirely identical: execute the precise assignment, command the huddle with authority, and maximize every single second he spent on the field. He reframed the reporter's attempt to create an unfair competition into a personal quest for mastery, pointing out that true growth comes from how an athlete handles limited opportunities rather than complaining about arbitrary distribution counts. By taking full ownership of his personal development, while simultaneously respecting the coaching staff's rotational authority, he completely neutralized the narrative of an entitled quarterback throwing a passive-aggressive tantrum over playing time. When the conversation shifted to Todd Monken's offensive playbook and the subtle suggestion that the scheme compromised his natural talents to cater to Watson, Shedeur dismantled the trap with an effortless display of selfless team culture. Rather than debating system mechanics or offering technical critiques that could be twisted into a rift with his offensive coordinator, he zoomed out to focus entirely on collective success. He declared that an elite quarterback does not demand a system tailor-made for his individual glory, but rather possesses the mental adaptability to thrive within whatever structure best serves the team on game day. He praised Monken's strategic brilliance, emphasizing how the offensive coordinator was systematically building a versatile, multi-layered attack capable of attacking defenses in a dozen different ways. By elevating the dialogue from personal preference to organizational strategy, Shedeur made the reporter's loaded question look petty, shallow, and detached from the actual realities of winning football. He effectively shut down any attempt to pit quarterback against play caller, turning what was intended to be an explosive headline into a glowing testimonial for the coaching staff's vision. Finally, when confronted with the most toxic landmine of all, the direct invitation to declare himself ready to replace an injured or struggling veteran, Shedeur delivered his most impressive deflection of the entire campaign, facing a room full of reporters waiting to catch him stepping on Watson's toes. Shedeur didn't express arrogance or defensive insecurity. He immediately deflected the spotlight away from himself and showered explicit, authentic praise directly onto his senior colleague. He articulated how invaluable Watson's veteran experience, film study habits, and leadership had been to his own professional development, emphasizing that their quarterback room operated as a unified brotherhood rather than a hostile rivalry. He made it abundantly clear that his sole focus was supporting the starting unit while staying perpetually prepared for any situation the team required, firmly refusing to engage in hypothetical scenarios built upon a teammate's misfortune. This deliberate, unwavering posture of loyalty left the drama-seeking journalists with absolute zero outrage material to broadcast on evening sports highlight shows. They had arrived at the press complex expecting to ignite a primetime scandal, but Shedeur's disciplined responses consistently stripped away every drop of fuel, leaving them staring at empty notebooks while a young general quietly solidified his absolute control over the room. While the local media corps grew increasingly frustrated by Shedeur Sanders' refusal to provide cheap controversy, national NFL insiders and veteran analysts viewed his press conference performances through a completely different lens. Across major network panel shows, film breakdown podcasts, and league-wide insider reports, seasoned analysts began highlighting his calculated media composure as a profound indicator of elite professional maturity. Former head coaches turned television commentators marveled at how a second-year signal caller operating under the blinding spotlight of being Deshaun Sanders' son could display the media discipline of a 15-year veteran. They repeatedly replayed clips of his press conferences, not to analyze his spoken words, but to highlight the underlying emotional control required to systematically disarm loaded questions without showing a single flicker of frustration. National reporters who had spent decades covering complex locker room dynamics pointed out that Shedeur's public poise was actively shielding the franchise from internal division, preventing speculative headlines from infiltrating the team's daily preparation in Berea. Behind closed doors, The reception among NFL front offices was even more emphatic. Veteran talent evaluators and high-ranking league executives secretly place massive value on quarterbacks who refuse to air dirty laundry or validate external narrative traps. In an era where a single reckless quote can ignite a multi-day media firestorm and destroy team chemistry, a passer who acts as a total emotional fortress is considered a rare asset. Front office insiders noted that head coaches, particularly offensive minds like Todd Monken, privately revere signal callers who absorb pressure without projecting it onto their teammates or play callers. Analysts detailed how Shedeur's refusal to take shots at coaching staff rotations or throw subtle shade at Deshaun Watson demonstrated an acute understanding of organizational hierarchy and locker room diplomacy. By publicly deflecting credit to his teammates while quietly accepting full responsibility for his own growth, Sanders proved to executive circles that his mental makeup was built for the harsh realities of high-stakes franchise leadership. The national consensus was rapidly shifting. What sensationalist reporters viewed as dull, evasive stonewalling, real football insiders recognized as a masterclass in psychological command. This mental discipline in front of a live microphone is far more than a masterclass in public relations. It is the ultimate indicator of how a quarterback processes stress when the stakes are at their highest. In the high-pressure ecosystem of the NFL, the human brain does not differentiate between the psychological hostility of a media interrogation and the physical chaos of a collapsing pocket under Sunday night lights. Both environments demand the exact same neural trait: elite emotional regulation in the presence of overwhelming noise. When a quarterback stands at the podium facing a firing squad of aggressive journalists, baiting him into a career-altering mistake, his nervous system undergoes a stress response identical to the one triggered when a 300-pound pass rusher breaks free off the blind side. A signal caller who loses his composure under verbal heat, who snaps at reporters, reacts defensively, or allows subtle frustration to cloud his judgment, reveals an internal vulnerability that defensive coordinators will relentlessly exploit on the field. Shedeur Sanders' absolute refusal to flinch before the press corps proves that his cognitive processing speed remains entirely untethered from external chaos. When journalists hurl loaded landmines designed to make him panic, Shedeur exhibits the same internal equilibrium required to stand tall in the pocket while an unblocked edge rusher barrels directly toward his chest. While an ordinary quarterback panics under media scrutiny, rushing his answers or making emotional missteps, Shedeur slows time down. He assesses the intent behind the incoming question, identifies the underlying threat vectors, and calmly executes the precise conversational pivot needed to neutralize the danger. That exact same psychological mechanism dictates his playmaking inside the hash marks. When a blitz package disguise collapses the primary structure of a play, Shedeur does not rush his footwork or panic into a catastrophic turnover. He remains ice-cold inside the storm, scanning secondary coverage layers with the exact same surgical poise he uses to disarm a press conference room. Furthermore, this unwavering composure creates a profound psychological advantage inside his own locker room during an intense quarterback competition. Football players are hyper-perceptive observers. They instinctively look to their quarterback to gauge the emotional temperature of the entire franchise during moments of adversity. If a starting passer shows visible irritation over practice rep rotations, expresses resentment toward coaching staff decisions, or engages in subtle backstabbing with rival teammates, the locker room culture rapidly decomposes into factional fighting and distrust. But when Shedeur responds to adversity with calm gratitude, unyielding support for his teammates, and absolute operational discipline, he radiates an undeniable authority that earns the silent respect of every veteran in the building. His teammates witness a leader who absorbs intense national heat without ever cracking, complaining, or passing blame down the chain of command. They realize that if this young passer cannot be rattled by millions of national eyes and aggressive media traps, he certainly will not break when trailing by 6 points with 90 seconds remaining on the clock. Ultimately, the battle for control over an NFL team is won long before game day kickoff. It is forged in how a leader handles the psychological warfare that surrounds modern sports entertainment. Shedeur Sanders has demonstrated that his mental armor is impervious to external narrative manipulation, turning what was supposed to be a media circus into a platform that highlights his elite emotional fortitude. The press corps came expecting to watch a volatile spectacle of celebrity drama, but they inadvertently exposed a stone-cold general whose calm discipline makes him an absolute nightmare for opposing defenses. As the season approaches, one truth stands abundantly clear. If the national media machine could not force Shedeur to lose his cool under a spotlight, no defensive coordinator on earth will ever make him bleed under pressure.